Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the Intelligent Community Podcast. My name is Matthew Owen. I'm the Director of Operations for the Intelligent Community Forum, and with me, as always, is co-founder of ICF, Lou Zaccarilla. How you doing, Lou?
Doing good, Matt. How you doing?
I am great. This is like spring training for me. I'm a huge baseball fan, and we're in a really exciting time at ICF. That's because we've just recently named the 2022 Intelligent Community of the Year, and we're starting to set our sights on the 2023 awards cycle.
Right.
Lou, we just had the summit. What do you have to say about New Taipei City, our new Intelligent Community of the Year?
Well, they got through spring training. They went through the whole season, and they won the World Series. Just to keep with your analogy. And by the way, you're in Florida, so that's an appropriate place. You got back home safe and sound from Ohio. After four tries, fourth time as a top seven, they broke through and became an Intelligent Community of the Year. What really stood out, I think, was the way they impressed the entire audience and global audience by saying something that we've been saying for a long time, but proving it, which is technology is great. Technology's the thing that you start with. But at the end of the day, this is about the citizen. This is about the human being in the community. And I think for the first time in a comprehensive way, they demonstrated how that works and what that looks like in a place. And I think it actually blew people away. Don't you think?
I do. And actually, it's fitting that we're talking about New Taipei City because Dr. Tseng from New Taipei City, he's their Chief Secretary of Research, Development, and Evaluation from New Taipei City, Taiwan. He's going to be one of the panelists on today's panel that we're going to be featuring on the podcast, which is a panel that took place on October 26th at the summit. It's called The Future of the Connected City. Joining Mr. Tseng will be Peter Cressy, the president of Entropy Inc., Lindsay Miller, the president of Lit Consulting, and Peter Portaina, who's the director of the Eindhoven International Project Office, based out of the Netherlands. We've also got a pretty familiar face who's moderating that one, Lou, because that was your panel at the summit.
Yeah, it was. It was the, again, we'll stay with our baseball analogy. It was the first inning. It was the opening pitch, so to speak. But they really did a great job because what people are going to see next, Matt, as you know, is us sort of saying, okay, where do we go from here now? We've got more connectivity, we've got more sophistication in the networks. But again, building on what New Taipei City said, how do we build this thing so that human beings can live more comfortable, prosperous, quality of life existences in these places? So for me, it was a great session. Sometimes, as you know, you can feel your way through these things and they're a slug, right? But this one was really it was like a home run. I think everybody was on their game. So I think they're going to enjoy it. I think the audience will enjoy this.
Well, without any further ado, let's take you there. We're going back to October 26th for this keynote panel from the ICF Summit. We'll see you soon.
Play ball.
Yes, I'd like to invite up Mr. Peter Cressy, president of Entropy. Lindsay Miller. Hi, Lindsay. President of Lit Consulting. Peter Portaina, the Eindhoven International Projects Office. Hi, Peter. Peter will be the tallest person at the summit, I guarantee it. And Mr. Seng Chao Sung from New Taipei City, welcome, please. And myself, I'm the director of the Love Boat Tour here today. So please sit. I'm going to stand, actually. So,
You guys want to come in here?
yeah, if you guys want to just sit together. That was pretty good, Lindsay. All right. Well, we're going to talk about the future of connectivity. Obviously, connectivity, digital connectivity, is the foundation of the technology-focused city. But as you know, we talk about going from smart to intelligent, right? Technology is not the thing. It's the railroad, right? And remember the railroad? It ran through Ohio. It ran through all of your countries. If it didn't run through your community, well, you had a problem because you couldn't put cargo on it to trade with the next community, to trade with the next state, to trade with countries that had joined you. It was that critical. The infrastructure was that important. Obviously, digital connectivity is the same way. Increasingly, people and communities are putting in the new infrastructure. You guys got there first. But the question is, it makes many things possible, but what things are possible? What things are being done? And where do we need to go to get to the kind of future we want. At the ICF, we take a more holistic approach, as you know. We talk about building a community, not building the infrastructure. That's just part of it. So today what I'd like to do with these experts is explore where we're headed. What is the future of connectivity, given where we are at the present moment? So let's first talk about the technology. Peter, first tell us a little bit about entropy systems, but then I'd like to answer the question for me. How would you advise your clients, because you've worked with Dublin and others, to use high-speed connectivity as a competitive advantage, both culturally and economically?
Thanks, Lou, and thanks to our panel members. I'm Peter Cressy from Entropy, and we're a technology advisory firm in the area of networks, broadband, and many things. But to answer the question, I'd say the big thing is to work backwards from the customer experience. Because we can look at broadband connectivity as it relates to speed. We can look at broadband connectivity as putting down fiber, satellite, or cable. But the most important thing is, what is the impact to the person in the home who's having the experience? And connected to me means two things. It means interconnected among the population and businesses. But more importantly, the connected part means that we're connected as digital people to cloud. And I have no stake in the outcome, but really what's happening is we're digital people now. And the question is, what is our digital experience? It's applications on cloud, applications on our device, and the connectivity that feeds that back and forth. So there's an interplay of the connectivity simply between a device and the network. And the question is, well, what's happening? What's happening is we're trying to bring as much pieces of data that feed applications to experiences back into a device. And so when we look at connectivity, my simple advice is to say, work back from the home. I'll finish by saying that historically, broadband connectivity was based upon a video television experience. Guess what? That experience is not valid anymore. The experience is now on your mobile device. My spouse, she doesn't watch movies on TV. She thinks it's boring. She actually watches it on her laptop. And my daughter watches all of her Netflix on her phone when there's a TV available. So I ask the question rhetorically, connectivity to the device, what is the network feeding there, and how many bits of data can be brought to those applications? Finally, when we look to the future, we look to the future of the companies and communities that are making investments on those next-generation applications. I'm excited about Dublin as an example because they look to that for new applications, not just from the applications experience, but also for driving economic development. So hopefully that's not too long an answer.
No, that's good. Thank you, Peter, for starting us off. Lindsay, let me just, same themed question, but Peter said something that's really important and that we're seeing here and we're seeing around the world. Why is it important to have the home connected now? Is it just, well, it's not just so people can watch Netflix, right? There's another economic and social imperative. Something else is happening today. Can you talk to that a little bit from Lit's perspective?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I am Lindsay Miller with Lit Communities. I think that's the first time I've said that in a presentation. I just joined Lit Communities a couple months ago. So if you had attended ICF events previously, you may have heard me as Lindsay Miller with Ice Miller. And if you were here a really long time ago, I was Lindsay Miller with Connect Ohio. So it's really nice to see everyone.
Give her a hand. She just got a new job.
Thanks. I really appreciate that.
More money, Lindsay?
So in my role with Lit Communities, I run our consulting arm. So I'm the president of Lit Consulting, working with communities across the United States as they try to figure out where they are in terms of connectivity, where they want to be in terms of connectivity, and essentially how they get there and how we pay for it. So when we talk about why home broadband is important, if you had asked me this in October of 2019, I probably would have had a really long-winded answer about it. But in October of 2022, having still coming out of a pandemic, I think it's pretty clear to all of us why home broadband is really important. So of course there's the entertainment value, and at Lit we say that we try to connect individuals to information, ideas, and each other. And so there's a big social component of it, which was really predominant in the COVID pandemic. But from an economic standpoint, more and more people are working from their home. They're receiving education from their home. They're receiving healthcare from their home. I am fully remote, so I live in downtown Columbus here, and my home is my economic engine. This is where I do my work. And so while it is still extremely important that our communities as a whole are connected, because we have to make sure that we have access for all facets of our populations, and we have public computing sites, and we have Wi-Fi availability where applicable, et cetera, in public areas, home connectivity is just interwoven now into our day-to-day existence. And as more things go to different devices, there's going to be that expectation that education can continue to occur from each set of devices, that healthcare access can continue to occur from each set of devices. And so having that ongoing, ubiquitous, robust, all of the words we like to use around it, broadband at home is going to be vital.
Thank you, Lindsay. And you know, we're going to now go to New Taipei City, a city that actually practices a lot of the things you're talking about. And with regard to education, I think what's happening in New Taipei City, because we've had a chance to look at them, 4 times in the top 7, is kind of remarkable. They're an example of how digital trust is being built and how people are embracing the new digital lifestyle. So, Mr. Tsang, welcome. Yeah. I want to ask you, Mr. Singh, I'm sorry, can you share with us how your city is using high-speed broadband as a competitive advantage, please?
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Because of New Taipei City is a bigger city, so we still face the problems of like the traffic jam or pollutions and so on. We hope to through the ICT technology to solve the problems. We make a lot of effort in this. For example, we built a system to buy the mobile tools to share the patient's data to the hospital and ambulance. So the survival rate in New Taipei City, we success save the more 2,000 people's life by these systems. That's what we do.
And in New Taipei City, what you're referring to also is a hiking city. There are mountains, and you've put Wi-Fi through these mountains. And literally, they've saved lives, and then people have gotten lost. And so the quality of life there is very high. And that, correct me if I'm wrong, but everything that you do with your technology is meant to improve the quality of life. And that's a policy. Is that right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And again, that's when we talk about intelligent cities, that's a classic example. Peter Eindhoven, thank you so much. Peter Eindhoven, of course, is one of the archetypal intelligent cities going back, over a decade. When you were discussing how to evolve into an intelligent community, obviously you needed broadband, you needed to have the network functional. The success always comes after, and everybody says, well, wasn't that easy? Or at least the rest of the world looks at Eindhoven and says, that must have been easy. But it wasn't easy, right? I mean, how challenging was it to push forward that vision of a broadband connected community? And what lessons does Eindhoven offer to the rest of communities going through this exercise?
Well, the first lesson I learned is that it's about respect and hospitality. So I first want to pay my warm-hearted feelings from the city of Eindhoven to Dublin, city of Dublin, also the Columbus region, because I've been here some years ago with our former mayor, Rob van Rijssel, and I had good memories. And today I consider Eindhoven I really look at Eindhoven as the smaller brother of what's happening here in the Columbus, the broader Columbus area. So much respect for that. And especially I remember that we were also looking into these ideas of a mobility lab in the public environment, and we didn't manage to get it as far as you did here. So many respect for that, and also inspiration. During that visit, we also went to Taipei. We visited the Taipei Design Week, and especially as we speak, we are hosting the Dutch Design Week in Eindhoven this week. So we're meeting another lot of international friends. And Lou is already looking at his watch, but I couldn't avoid giving this small introduction, because the connection is where it's all about. It's connecting the people in our region. It's where Eindhoven started, with the background as an agriculture and also a tobacco region, where early days Philips decided to build their first factories, because that was the place where they could find affordable space and a lot of unemployment, so cheap labor. So these were the constraints that brought high-tech to Eindhoven. And that is where Philips initially built their first light bulb factory. And that is where the whole innovation ecosystem started to develop. And one of the good things that was already recognized early days, even before we were involved in the ICF methods and also the ICF community, is that the public infrastructure, both physical but also digital, was one of the prerequisites to develop and enhance our regional development. So that is one thing we took, we recognized for early days. One thing we did not recognize early days is that we only limited to the metropolitan part of the province. So that really took us big steps and also a lot of burden to broaden our network to the more rural parts of our province. So that was one of the lessons we learned, especially in the last 2 years of COVID, when we all learned that how the importance of reaching out to all your communities to allow homework, home education, and others. So these are some of the lessons we took, and especially the ICF engagement actually accelerated that, because as you know, one of the main indicators is about the availability of widespread internet, and that's actually helped us to leverage and also make sure that we broadened the footprint of our network and also a footprint for digital services in our economy in general. So I think that is where things come together in a very neat way. And I think also the pin I'm wearing is the pin that's the friendship between the Netherlands and Vietnam. You see a lot of Vietnamese friends here, they're from Binh Duong, and we have the privilege of bringing also ICF to Vietnam. So that is the way we also interpreted the connections we try to bring and also share some of these expertise as you're doing here in Dublin today. Thank you.
Well, don't give that up yet, Peter. I got another question for you, but thank you. And so, yeah, it is important that that Eindhoven is now mentoring another community, right? But I want to go back to your experience with Philips, because I think a lot of cities will relate to this, which is you had a big company there that was almost like your grandfather. I mean, it was taking care of everybody economically and socially and so forth. And over the years, the company declined. It left. And so you guys were left with a situation where you needed to now create a more innovative economy. What role did the network play? And maybe give us a little insight with regard to how long it took to recover from Philips leaving Eindhoven, and what advice you would give to a city now so that they don't get burned, unexpectedly. Not that you guys got burned, but,
Well, I mean, we're a long way from home, so I can say that actually the fact that Philips started to decline was maybe the best thing for our region to happen. Because that is where Philips left the high-tech campus. It became an open innovation space. That is where they opened up the whole innovation systems. And it really forced us to think about advanced and other governance models, how because we are a small region, we're only like 400,000 people. So we have only little money to spend, and we have to be very selective what we do and what we don't. So that actually forced us, and you've heard that before. Even in Vietnam, there's now a translation for the triple helix. That is when we start to realize by the late 90s that we had to align cooperation between public, private, and education in a more advanced and committed way. Because everybody is talking about cooperation, and we do a little here together, we do a little there together. But bringing that to a strategic agenda where everybody puts in some money on the table, commitment for the long term, I think that is also what we see successfully happening here in Columbus. But I can also assure you that is also what we see happening successfully in Benzum. So it's a universal model which you actually cannot copy it, but you can, let's say, implement it tailored to local needs like culture, politics, and other systems. So that is, I think, what really pushed us forward, and that actually within 5 years after Philips had their really bad times, the things start to grow again. But I must, a warning, one of the companies that spun out of Philips is ASML. ASML, sometimes you might know them, but they are the world leading manufacturer of chip manufacturing equipment. So Intel, TSMC, all these guys, they buy their equipment from ASML. And actually our region is now pushed to the boundaries of our system in terms of growth, because ASML has to double every 5 years. That is also pushing the limits of our social systems like housing, all kind of social facilities. So we are actually in a phase of reconsideration where also the social growth and the social expansion of what can happen, not only economically driven, is a high attention today, and even political discussion day by day, because actually we cannot cope with the growth they want to make in our region.
Thanks, Peter. And I want to pick up on that social growth issue, but I think the story you're telling about Eindhoven would sound familiar to Megan and Mayor Fox, right? I mean, the collaboration has been key here, the growth has been phenomenal, but you always have to continue to think about what's next, right? So it's a very familiar story of success. Peter, I'm going to go back to you as the technologist on the panel. 5G, you know, it gets more buzz than Tom Cruise. I mean, it's just unbelievable. Everybody talks about 5G. Everybody relates to that, right? That's an example. It's used to provide better service to citizens, but what advice would you give to a city that's considering 5G, that's rushing into considering 5G? And follow-up question on that would be, for both you and Lindsay, does every city need 5G?
5G, the next generation. Is this microphone on?
I think so.
Hello?
Can you hear?
5G, the next generation after 4G, just means next generation, right? Gives you more capacity. And so the best advice I could think about of 5G is take it slow. There are over 100 major developments across the world in 5G. Billions of dollars have been spent into 5G. And really, what is it? It's just a little bit more capacity on the in the mobile architecture. So that should be creating a mobile experience that's akin to what we'll be seeing in the home. That's the opportunity, because as we look at the mobile trends that are happening in people's lives, we are becoming our own devices. We all treasure our device, and many of us actually sleep with our device right next to us within an arm's reach. Some people...
That's when they do wish it was Tom Cruise.
Exactly. But it's that relationship with your mobile device that 5G represents. So the promise of 5G is it'll provide greater connectivity faster. It has not happened from an application point of view. 5G in the United States is searching for money in enterprise and businesses first. It hasn't happened. And the question of the impact is it faster and better? I suppose, but it all relates back to that. So communities that are looking for 5G, of the interplay between 5G and the home, that also is not really kitted out yet. They're kind of two different experiences. One is a device in your home, and one is a device there. The people say, well, can't I just use 5G in my home to get great connectivity? No, you got to do remote work from home. You can't do remote work from home or aging in place or many things on a 5G network. And so there's the IGPP, which is the international body that lists all the different applications in 5 different areas. And that's still under development and going to take time. That's the challenging. The good news is they're spending money like crazy into 5G, and so that capacity is going to be available, but I believe it's going to take some time before they realize potential to knit together the device in the 5G experience. It's a lot more than bandwidth. It's more about the application impact from the bandwidth, and the communities have to consider what does the community bring to the citizens on an impact basis, and that, working backwards from the citizens' need, will give you the answer for 5G investment, in my opinion.
Good insight, Peter, taking everything from the citizen's perspective. Lindsay, do you want to pick up on that at all?
I do. So first of all, 5G gets more buzz than Tom Cruise. Like, that's going to be my line of this whole event. I'm probably going to tweet that later. But when we talk about 5G, it really at this point is kind of more of a marketing thing than anything else. So if you turn on your TV, if you're still watching TV that has commercials in any form, it's hard to get through a commercial break without seeing a 5G commercial in the United States. And completely agree on what was said on the device side of things. You know, even when 5G is available, do you have a 5G enabled device? Can your device even access that? And even though your phone may say in the top corner 5G, that does not mean you're actually getting a 5G experience. Again, that's more marketing. But we need to talk about, I want to expand on the bandwidth comment. We do need to talk about the bandwidth component of 5G, which means 5G is given this kind of blanket term, but there are different iterations of 5G. So to say, does a community need 5G? Well, what 5G are we talking about? So it depends on what spectrum or bandwidth really that 5G signal is traveling over and how quickly that signal is traveling, how tight those wavelengths are. TV commercials would make 5G seem that all 5G is the connected and autonomous cars and the Jetsons kinds of things. But the 5G experience that most of us are going to get is going to be an upgrade in our cell phone service, ideally. But our day-to-day use of 5G is not going to be these highly enabled, super fast technology things that, like I said, TV enables. Where we will see those deployments, though, are in really dense areas. We're seeing them a lot in stadiums, you know, where people are packed in, the equipment can talk to each other, that wavelength can stay really tight. Things like test corridors, like the 33 corridor, places like that make a lot of sense. But day-to-day usage, most of us just will not see the type of 5G that that I think the term 5G has become synonymous with.
That's advertised, not as good as advertised, so to speak. Can you just, if you know, just elaborate a little bit on the importance of 5G on that 33 corridor? Because when we talk about the future of connectivity, you know, as Megan said, that is the future of autonomous vehicles. It's right up the street here, folks.
So I don't want to speak on behalf of the 33 corridor or in any way, shape, or form, but I'm somewhat familiar with it, having been in this area for a while. And I think what's important to note is the fiber backbone that's there that enables the roadside units and the wireless service from there. Because when we talk about technology deployments, it is my personal belief, and you can use whatever acronym or analogy you like, that it's a layer cake approach. There is a role for different types of technologies in these deployments, and something like a 33 corridor is a perfect example of that. Megan talked about the fiber loop that runs the route, again, the roadside units that are there, and then the wireless connectivity that will be enabled as a result of the poles, essentially, that are along the route, and the kind of edge computing that can happen as a result of a lot of that infrastructure. And so something like a 5G or a millimeter wave 5G, which travels, again, short wavelengths and small distances, can be huge for testing everything from transportation to other use cases in terms of safety and utility monitoring, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Very good, thanks. Now, we might hear a different point of view from New Taipei City, from Mr. Tseng, because Taiwan is moving very quickly in the 5G area. So, Mr. Singh, I want to go back and ask that same 5G question to you in terms of what New Taipei City is doing and you know, its approach to 5G in terms of supporting citizens. Can you help us there?
I try my best to discuss it. Okay. This year we talk about 5G because we believe it can bring the better future. But I believe most cities' consideration of 5G is it must to spend most cost on build the infrastructures. So and some cities think the 4G is enough to people use, and 5G is necessary. It's a question to think. However, 5G can can help us to solve the problem and present cannot solve. So we need 5G to improve our life. That's my opinion.
So it will be a good thing. It will improve life. Thank you. Peter, do you want to just reflect a little bit on how that might occur, or how you've observed 5G improving life, or how it might improve life 5 or 10 years down the road?
Well, I'll admit something that yesterday was the microphone. Yesterday was the first time when I saw 5G on my mobile phone in my life. So for me, 5G in Holland is still far away. But as we are taking it, 5G also has implications in the public environment and the way you deploy antenna infrastructure, and obviously also the backbone and fiber, which you'll be needing if you want to deploy it. So what I see is a slow transition now that we're in terms of urban renewal. We're carrying this towards new city lighting structures where we are integrating the antennas and some sensoring into new light poles. So we take it in a very practical way. We adapt and also prepare ourselves from an infrastructure point, and we make sure that the basic backbone is there, and then the market eventually will decide when we see the big transition from these telecom providers, and where the market will adopt it based obviously on the use of, let's say, high data applications. So we're not going to take a stand on that, but from a city perspective, I think it's important that we at least anticipate the moment where it will come. And if it hits you and you are not prepared, then based off the frequency of antennas you will be needing, it is creating a different picture if you look at a city compared to what we've seen with 3 and 4G antennas. So that is all going to influence, and that's going to raise a public debate as well on the safety aspects of antennas. So I want to say, Philips, for instance, just introduced these integrated antennas in light poles where you could bring in some sensoring for air quality and other things for traffic management. And that's a neat way of hiding the antennas and also integrating it in your public infrastructure instead of try to deploy it and then go through the city again, open it all up and putting all of these antennas on different places. You get a rat race of who's going to exploit the places where you can put the antennas. So that is something we at least will try to avoid. And I am not in a position to predict when 5G will be dominant, but obviously we see it coming, and then we all should be prepared from a city perspective.
Very good, thanks, Peter. Only Taiwan knows when it's going to be dominant. They're not going to tell anybody, so they're going to control the market, right? I'm going to change topics a little bit. Does anybody have any questions, though, that they would like to ask our panelists, or any reflections of their own? This would be the time. Okay. Oh, yeah, sir. I'll give you a microphone. Just introduce yourself, if you don't mind.
No problem. Hi. My name's Raman. I'm from D-Link Systems out of Southern California. We've talked a little bit, first of all, thank you for all the contributions in your comments. We've talked a little bit about fiber and also 5G. Does anybody on the panel want to speak to satellite infrastructure at all?
Peter, you want to go first? Sorry. Thanks. Good question. Yeah, the satellite in the history of satellite is wide distribution, broadcast. That was the aspect of it. And then satellite has a role in rural areas for distribution. So what satellite as it relates to information? Rural area penetration to get them going, and then basically broad distribution. What does that map onto? Entertainment, Super Bowl, and then communities for internet. But when you look at internet from uploading and downloading, call it upstream or downstream for satellite, if you go to a DirecTV offering or something like that, it can't keep up with the current infrastructure and the applications. It will not keep up. It'll give you basic connectivity. But for the digital divide, it's absolutely a gap filler in those particular areas. And then what's coming with low Earth orbit satellites, we're going to be seeing that connectivity as the low Earth orbit satellites provide greater connectivity around that can play off of 5G, fiber, and feed back onto cloud. So as a feeder satellite to move information around the world, it's very effective that way.
especially when we want to be an interconnected world coming from Taiwan or Vietnam or other places into connected cities. So satellite as part of the mix is a very important part.
Does that answer your question, or do you have a follow-up? Okay. Peter, just Lindsay for a second. The hybrid network, what role will satellite play in creating more complex networks that can do more things, especially with data? Because the amount of data flowing out there now needs broader networks.
Yeah, I should have mentioned that. The hybrid networks on an international basis will feed hybrid cellular backhaul. This is what's so important. If we're going to develop Africa as a nation, in a continent, how do we do that? Satellite on a hybrid networks. In the United States or even Canadian markets, the hybrid way actually moves data very, very well because you can use caching technologies to use it. It doesn't always have to be fast. You can actually cache and feed it. So that combination, think about it, you're getting fast distribution of 10 gigabits per second into the home over a fiber network, but it can be fed by satellite depending on the programming or the information on data. So there's an interplay, and you put the third element of cloud, and what Amazon, quite honestly, has done in the satellite infrastructure with cloud and satellite, that's the third element of the hybrid. So I'm really positive about that, but for direct access to the home, no.
It's also, by the way, in terms of cities, because of the data now we're using it to manage water supplies, sustainability issues, and things like that. So I suspect you'll see more of that. Lindsay, you've been waiting patiently. Talk to us about satellite.
I'm going to go back to my layer cake analogy. Satellite has a role, absolutely. Similar to 5G, though, when I work with communities, I've been asked, especially in rural markets, do we need to address this, or is SpaceX coming? Can I just wait for SpaceX? And in the US. And again, it has a role, I think, particularly in rural markets. I don't think it should be a displacement for efforts to build out wired and other forms of wireless communications to those geographies. But the other thing that's really important when we talk about connecting our communities, there is, of course, the technology side of it. Is this technology available? But there's also the adoption side of it. Can folks afford it? And as of right now, some of those low orbit satellite systems that are available have a pretty high upfront cost for individuals to sign on for. And so even though technically the service may be available, folks still may be excluded for more of cost reasons. And so as a community, it's really important to think of those two sides of the broadband coin of, yes, this access is available, but just by making it available, does that mean that folks are actually going to be able to incorporate it into their lives?
And you would agree with Peter probably that the low-hanging fruit, the important connectivity issue for the future is that satellites can be used to connect the rural communities that are usually underserved.
100%. It's been going on for a long time. Again, there are challenges with that. Traditional satellite face a lot more interference than low orbit does. They were more subject to data caps, and then that also increased price and things like that. But in terms of just like the bringing access, absolutely. Here in Ohio, in our Appalachian regions, where it's like this, I'm using the same arm movement for my wavelengths as I am for the rolling hills of Ohio. Satellite can play a really pivotal role.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Oh, sure. Peter?
Well, just to remind you that although we are a little further away from Europe today here, but I'm living like 1,500 kilometers from the Ukraine, and we all realize what the disruptive contribution of a low-orbit satellite like SpaceX are delivering, especially today, to keep the Ukraine connected in these hard times. So sometimes disruption is delivering applications which we have not thought of, but still can also trigger and accelerate the use. Just as a reminder of reality we're all living today, and fortunately the US is all strong support for Europe on that. But
I mean, the military applications for satellites are well understood by people in the industry in terms of managing drone strikes and things like that. But that destroys cities. It doesn't help them. So we're going to get off that subject.
Sorry, I just have a quick comment. Iridium, if you heard of Iridium, they're building a business on a kilobit distribution on packets that are down to 20 kilobits to connect John Deere tractors and things around the world. So believe it, that's a big point.
Yeah.
You can have hugely innovative applications for satellite that are at kilobit applications with the innovation that you just mentioned. Iridium is the example of that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and they're driving tractors. I mean, literally. I mean, I in Mitchell, South Dakota, one of our top seven, I was in a tractor that was being driven basically by GPS satellite, and I still managed to put it in the ditch. But anyway, it was remarkable. Mr. Singh, did you want to comment at all on the satellite issue?
Okay, I think I have to say something. I always believe technology comes from human nature. Because of the technology is development very fast, so it can solve the problems that we cannot solve the problem now. For example, the traffic jam, it needed the high-speed transfer and the low delay. So if we have the high-speed broadband, we can solve this problem efficiently.
Very good. That's a perfect segue, Peter, to our next topic, because we talk about the holistic view of the community, right? The humanistic view. Everybody likes to use the phrase holistic growth, but it generally just is confined to economic activity, economic growth. Are there other things that we need to be thinking about when we talk about the intelligent community, the holistic community, the high-performing community? Why don't you get us started on that subject?
Well, just to share with you a little story. When we had our first meeting in Vietnam, and we started to discuss with the leadership of the province and also with the leadership of Bakermax about their future plans. And as you know, these countries are used to have long-term plans that sometimes are really handy compared to what we're used to in Europe, where we have new plans every 4 years or even faster if we have elections in between. And then we came up with the model of how we worked ourselves towards the high-tech region in Eindhoven, which we call the Brainport Navigator, so giving some direction, where do we want to go and how do we do that together? Which areas do we have to cover? How can we align the various areas which you have to, let's say, put in place to be at least positioned to become more successfully? And then the first time we had this discussion with Mr. Jung here, the vice chairman, he said in Vietnam it's always about socio-economic growth. So they're just two simple words, but these values are glued together in a country like Vietnam. So it's always about the economic and the social perspective that you should be delivering. So it cannot be the case that only the business side will be benefiting from a growing economy, putting in place the right education that serves the need of your workforce from the private side. And at the same time, the population should also be flourishing. So it should create a perspective in terms of jobs, also the increase and the raise of income, which you together managed to do very successfully in Benzung, because they went from middle income to higher middle income, and they're now even challenging to become high income in the next 10 years. So these are big steps, but these are not only for economic purposes. These are also to increase the GDP, to create local facilities in terms of education and healthcare that should go hand in hand with economic growth. And the third equation that has been added also recently is that it's about a green and sustainable future. One of the phrases we have entered into the new policies is it's inclusive growth. So that should mean that nobody digitally, physically, economically should be left behind. So I think these values about inclusive, sustainable growth, that's for me the holistic picture, how a region or a city should look at its economic plans, instead of only trying to find the money for the next FDI investment and building your next business park, because that's sometimes the very, let's say, two-dimensional approach, which we see many places also in Europe.
Thanks, Peter. And I think you're preaching to the converted here in Dublin, certainly.
Yes.
Yeah. But the idea of all of the other things that you described ultimately have, as you say, economic consequence. and it's usually positive. Mr. Tseng, I think New Taipei City is one of the great practitioners of holistic growth. Tell me what it means from your perspective when we talk about holistic growth. Can we measure that type of holistic growth that you work on, the human-centered growth? Do we have evidence of that, or is it just something that makes us feel good?
Okay. Because of the influence of nature, environment factors, our background, our culture, I believe that no city is complete in all aspects. It means each city has its advantages. If the connector can closer, now we can build a more complete cities to improve our life. So I think it's important.
And obviously your economic performance is proof in itself, right? 4 million people, but a very high performing city in terms of economic output. Lindsay, does LID Consulting look at factors like that when you look at the technology side as well? Is there a sort of a holistic perspective when you guys roll up your sleeves and go to work for a city or a client?
Yes, absolutely. One of the paradigm shifts that I would love to see more communities take is it's not infrequent that we'll be engaged in a community and they'll say, we're working on this broadband plan. And then we're also doing our community development plan or our long-term community planning, and they're siloed efforts. And really, ideally, they need to be married together. The reference earlier to the railroads, I think broadband right now is still somewhat put in its own bucket in terms of planning, in terms of deployment, but there are so many efficiencies to be gained from marrying it into other community planning efforts. So I brought up rail because railways still very much exist across the country and they have tons of rights of way. And that can be a great deployment opportunity if you can get into that rights of way, which can be challenging. But also when we're doing things like street planning, if we're digging up roads, if we're digging up sidewalks, we always encourage dig once policies. Can we at least get some conduit in the ground? Ideally, conduit with some fiber running through it. And so the more we can incorporate broadband planning just into our community plans, it is part of that. The cheaper and faster that technology can then be deployed as opposed to going back later and doing its own thing for it. And so we always try where we can to merge those efforts if they're going on simultaneously, or encourage folks to do so, or if nothing else, as I said, try to encourage dig once opportunities. And a comment was made earlier, momentarily ago, about the benefits of technology and how it can help individuals and save lives and all those things. If you've heard me speak before, I use this line a lot, but technology always outpaces policy. The technologies will always be there faster than the policies will be there to deploy them. And so making sure that your community is thinking about that and how it can encourage those technologies to be deployed faster locally, that's one of the biggest hurdles to getting them out there, because oftentimes the tech itself does exist.
Lindsay, can I just follow up? Because you work for Ice Miller, which is a law firm, so you know a little bit of what you speak. And by the way, they're a sponsor of ours, so thank you, Ice Miller. But yes, the technology has raced way ahead of our ability to legislate it, both at national levels and at local levels. What can we do on the side of the law to help move the law along in a little bit more parallel fashion? Because I hear that everywhere. That, yeah, we can do all of this stuff, but we're restricted legally in terms of that.
I have thoughts on this. So I am a lawyer by training. Before I left, before I left to go to lit communities, I was a partner at Ice Miller, working in their broadband and telecommunications practice. And this is actually the perfect opportunity if you are a community or an entity that does public-private partnerships in Ohio to look at Broadband Access Ohio. Because the most important thing communities can do, frankly, is organize themselves collectively. Because when we talk about policies and law, we have to be realistic about the lobbying efforts that are going on for these policies at a national level, at state levels, et cetera. And where communities have faced challenges here in the US before is that we had to be reactive. A law was introduced or a policy was introduced, and then we're scrambling to try to get our voices heard, as opposed to being proactive and getting in front of members at the key times and informing the policies before they come out. So it sounds kind of, maybe rudimentary, but truly being organized collectively and speaking with one common voice, such as Broadband Access Ohio is doing here, that can be key to making policies that support our community deployment of technology.
I hate to keep you on the hot seat here, but there may be people out there who aren't familiar with Broadband Access Ohio. Can you just describe it for people, because they may want to look into organizations like that in their own states or their own countries?
Sure, and there are a lot of Ohio communities in the room here who I'm sure can speak to it with more depth as well. But basically, I'm just going to give a little bit of history on it. I'm getting my years all jumbled together during COVID, but there was essentially a bill introduced, moved in during the legislative process in Ohio at the end of the session a little bit ago, that would have just cut off community networks and public-private partnerships at the knees across our state. And Ohio communities in Dublin was instrumental in this effort, and major shout out to them for that. Quickly organized themselves and got their voices in the room to say, this is the impact that would actually have. Whether or not this was the intent of the language, this is what it would mean. This is what it would mean for our communities, for our businesses, for our economic growth. And the impacts were widespread for every corner of our state. So after that happened and we were successful in getting that removed, a big effort was taken to have all these communities continue to coalesce around these issues, to officially organize themselves under the umbrella of this Broadband Access Ohio. It has leadership. Like I said, there are several communities here who are very much involved. And so now that effort, as I referenced a minute ago, is truly to go kind of back in and inform members along the way, to be present at our state house, to share the impact that community networks and public-private partnerships are having on technology deployment across Ohio, so those concepts can be woven in.
Thank you. And that's, that in many ways, that's the profile of the intelligent state. It does things like that because it's really important. Peter, I noticed you were giving a little bit of a golf clap there when Lindsay was talking about that aspect of technology and law. Yeah. What do you want to pick up on any of that? What part of that did you want to?
I think on the holistic, that's very Zen-like when I read the word about what makes a happy community. And to me, it's two things, especially in Dublin. I've had this experience in Dublin for the past year. Everything's citizen first. So that is the answer, citizen first. And in Dublin, they live it and they grow it. But the second thing is economic development. Everything's tied to economic development. So when we talk about Dublin as the most connected city, what I see the infrastructure, but I see the connectivity among the programs and what ICF has done here. And so holistic is those two combinations of basically citizen first versus economic development. And when you break that down on a holistic basis, where's the investment? It's broadband access, exactly what Lindsay says it has to be fought for. But I go back to what it is. If we are citizens first, who are we? And I use this analogy, I'll use my analogy too. Please, we are this. Please understand you are your mobile device. And what's in your mobile device? It's just two things. It's the ability to communicate and the ability to store. So when you look at your communities and basically say, how do I put digital citizens first? This is the answer. You have to basically solve for the equation of storage, of where that information is and applications are, which are mainly on cloud and accessing them. And the second thing is communication. How fast can you do it, whether it relates to latency? And that's the citizens first. But the real allure is, and again, playing off of what you said, Lindsay, was economic development. How do communities really translate? And there's a real flatness today in the community of just saying, just give me faster broadband speed, and that's the game. No. And that is the story about the digital divide. That's the story about equity. That's all it is a lot more than just giving fast speeds of 100 megabit, 300 megabit, 1,000 megabits, or 1 gigabit. You have to have applications in economic development. And I use one example here. What I'm excited about, as an example in Dublin, or an initiative, but across the world, is aging in place. I'm older. And so what is aging in place? It's creating an experience in the home that allows you to basically communicate and basically get access to what you need as a senior. You can't participate because you can't move. And who's here in the city? It's Cardinal Health. So shouldn't it be there a citizens first of seniors in the city? Shouldn't there be an initiative with Cardinal Health? And where does that come together? Telehealth. There's your answer. So you can absolutely map a citizens first initiative back to economic development. And does it work over and over and over? And you work from home. You're remote. And probably more effective because you're getting more stuff done at home and they're like that. So the advice to the community is take those two tenets of thinking of citizens first versus economic development, and you've got your answer beyond just flat broadband networks, that it's faster. We have to do better than that. And I think that's what Dublin, if you look at the initiatives of the most connected city, they're connecting all those other things together.
Yeah.
That's what holistic means to me.
Citizen First keeps coming up. Thank you, Peter. That was a good explanation of that. So I'm my phone. I'm not just a seasoned subscriber to the New York Metropolitan Opera, which I thought I was. That's why I'm my phone. All right, that's the way.
But you get notifications.
I get notifications. I can
in,
listen to it.
And you're listening to it, and you're on it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Mr. Tseng, that is probably music to your ears, Citizen First, right? Because again, when I was fortunate enough to do the site visit of New Taipei City this year, that was everything, all you talked about was how your idea of holistic growth was a social growth, was getting the citizens to trust the digital infrastructure. I mean, that was really, really important, wasn't it, from where you were? And what I remember is that the ways you did that were, I mean, you can order your own bus, a public bus in Taiwan. People don't wait around to learn when their garbage is going to be picked up like we do in New York. You know, I'm still waiting from April to have my garbage picked up. But yeah, I don't have the app. And nobody wants to come and visit me for some reason. But can you talk to me about that growth, that holistic growth and digital trust that you've developed in New Taipei City? Because you've pretty much accomplished what our colleagues here have been talking about.
Okay. This issue involves a wide range. Such as the growth of a city in various aspects related to food, clothing, or housing, or transportation, education, and so on, can be regarded a kind of holistic growth. We know due to the limitations of transportation, environments, resource or cultures, cities and remote areas will have different gaps. For instance, everyone here may know what 5G is, what AIoT is, but people away from here may not understand what it is, which we can call the digital gap. So in New Taipei City, we use the power of digital technology to reduce the gaps.
That's a very good way of saying it. We've got a few minutes left. I want to have one more brief topic, and we'll probably close a little early so you can network. Does anybody have any questions? Any follow-up, any comments? Okay, I'm sure you'll share them later. Peter, I want to get into the last subject, and I know this is an area that's close to your heart and philosophy, and that is rather than the digital orientation, you like to say, and I'm quoting you here, the digital infrastructure is enabling, but it never replaces the DNA of historic, cultural, and social connections. And you are now evolving your thinking to the point of saying that international connections among regions and cities, like we're doing today, are really going to sort through the challenges of supply chain, introduce more innovation more quickly among countries at the city level, and create, as we say, a new DNA or reinforce the DNA. Do you want to talk about how the social interactions among us have enabled that and why you are such a Zen master at practicing it?
Are you sure that's what I said? Well, I must reread the book. I quoted it from. No. Yes, I think that is close to my heart. It is also what I'm being triggered if we think that economic development is the answer to every problem we have. As at the same time, we're starting to realize that climate change and other major events are going to push us to reconsider the whole model of economic growth. So what we are now at least try to do, and that's a difficult message in Netherlands and in Europe, is to rethink where should that economic development take place, but obviously also where should we try to avoid it. It can be geographically, but it can also be sectorized, because we are reaching the limit of our resources in terms of nature, but also in terms of human talent. Europe is aging even faster than some other areas in the world, so we have to be very, let's say, careful with the resources we have. So that is one thing, and I already mentioned the fact that our region is already touching these boundaries. So that means that you have to also convey a message of things you do, but also of things you might not do any longer. Europe has a policy, it's called the selective innovation. So where do we want to be and where do we put our money and our resources as they are becoming more and more scarce? But that's also social resources, because we cannot go through this endless loop of growth. Some of you might know Kate Raworth, the new economist from the UK. She wrote a book called The Donut Economy. So it's not always expanding the donut, but we should be redividing how we share that and how we redivide it. And I think that is a difficult message also in terms of, because companies not always like it, and also politicians not always like it, because it's better if you have a solution that's always solved and the growth will solve it all by the end of the day. So that is really one thing which is makes me concerned about all future plans built on growth. And I must say I'm happy in Vietnam. We have an even a better year than in Europe, because they also start to rethink. In the past, they've used the land for a broad-scale expansion, and they have been a very unlimited use of resources. So they're now are rethinking their model of where do we want to expand any further, what type of industry do we want to attract, and where do we want to avoid that we have the next big tire factory in our region. So I think that is a kind of consciousness what is now developing, and it's not so Zen. I mean, that is also very, let's say, practical in the way you develop. And I think that is a message that every region or city should take, because if you only just follow the path you were on today, you will be sucked into the supply chains of the companies you already have. So then you will be like a victim of the model you have invented. And that can be successful for another few years, but again, it will run out itself. And that is, as a leader, a visionary leadership, start thinking well in advance, so that we not actually reach that point, but we can just avoid it, and just to come up with new ideas and policies that will help us to avoid it. And eventually that will have a big impact on the quality of life and the daily life of people in your city.
And, as Lindsay said, get prepared for that. And the essence of Zen is that the way you avoid suffering is not be attached to things like the past. So it is. And did you think you were going to come here today and learn Zen from Peter? Thank you, Peter. Mr. Tseng, because you're a top 7 city, I'm going to give you the honor of answering the final question here for us. As you think about the future, and you think about it a lot, what will be the number one thing, the top thing that will keep people investing in New Taipei City as they have been investing in the past?
Okay. It's hard to answer the question, actually. I saw it online. I think it's about a visible future. All we can say the future is concrete and visible, even for people to feel and see. For such as the financial investment, you want to invest a company that may make many years to make a profit, or a company that may fail in the short term. You invest this company because you can see the future of the company. So you believe it will make the profit to you. It's the same with cities. Making people know the city will be better because of the things you have done. That make people safer, more comfortable, more convenient, and more enjoyable. And they will willing to continue invest in the cities.
Thank you, very good. And that includes the new science and intellectual park that you've spent billions of dollars developing and is sort of like a paradise, a new paradise for innovation. And we encourage you to read about that. It's a remarkable look at the future, as New Taipei City typically is. So, Lindsay and gentlemen, thank you so much for being a part of this. I think it's a pretty good way to get us started. I hope you feel that way as well. But please give them a big hand.
So that's all the time we have today for the Intelligent Community Podcast, and I've got to say, that was a fantastic opening session to the summit. Lou, now that you've had a chance to actually watch it back instead of participating, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's interesting when you watch it again, as opposed to trying to conduct the orchestra. How it looks. It looks even better. I was really struck by the exchanges on 5G and whether it's necessary, what it is, what it isn't. That was, I think, took a lot of people by surprise, and I thank Peter Cressy for that. And Peter would know. I mean, he's the guy who builds these complex networks. I also thought Lindsay's comments. Now, Lindsay comes at it from a unique position because she was also a lawyer, right? She worked with Ice Miller Law Firm, and now she's moved on to her own group. The idea that, we're seeing technology race ahead of the legal framework, and we're going to need to continuously take a look at that. I thought that was an important point that she made when we talk again about the future. Mr. Tsang, of course, sort of money in the bank, talking about his city and what they've accomplished. And it was a good lead-in because, Peter, who I really wanted to pin down in another direction, so to speak, Peter was talking about the importance of the DNA of culture and he made a great point, Matt, as you recall, about how communities now are connecting in a way that countries, nations used to connect, and helping each other with supply chains, startups, and all of the economic activity that we used to associate with trade offices and diplomatic offices. Those things still exist, but Peter was pointing to intelligent communities as this sort of new model for global connectivity on the human level, on the economic level. And that was really fascinating. And, you expect that from Eindhoven, from the Dutch, because they're just so far out there ahead in some of the thinking on this stuff. At least that's what I saw.
And this is only the start, because we have a lot of excellent summit content that's going to be released through our podcast channel in the coming weeks. We're going to be taking you through quite a few of the panel discussions that were featured at that event. So we hope you do subscribe to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or if you're using intelligentcommunity.org, our website, to view this, just keep checking in our podcast session as well.
So listen, thank you, everybody. We really appreciate you tuning into this episode of the Intelligent Community, this special episode from our summit in Dublin. So take care, and remember, there really is no place like home. Take care, everybody.